we are living, and we always have lived in such an achievement-based culture, so that we achieve something, and then there's like 10 seconds where we go, yay. But then you're like, oh, well, I could lose more weight. I could do a 10K instead of a 5K. I could, make $1.5 million in my business instead of $1 million, right? So the goalpost is always moving.
You are listening to Amplify Your Success podcast, episode 426. And today, I hope you're ready, because it's time to stop living the should life and start living your dream life now. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and ripple makers. It's your host, Marni Battista, authority amplifier to ripple making experts ready to make a big, bold impact on this planet. And today I've got a special guest joining us. I've known this woman for over a decade, maybe close to 15 years. And she's doing some extraordinary work in the world. I had the great privilege of helping her through a bit of a brand pivot where she was bringing this new work to life, working on her lighthouse message with her, and really helping her shape it to move it quickly out in the world. Because I know there's something for ripple makers. It's like when you get stuck in your own thoughts and you can't quite figure it out, it's just so frustrating. And it doesn't have to be that frustrating. One of the things we did is we looked at where she was at on her ripple making journey, like how well was her machine working, and dialed that in. And if you're realizing you are here to do big things, you want to get a bold message out in the world, but your ripple's just a little too small, maybe your waves are crashing on the shore instead of making that ripple you're hoping for, then go take my ripple making readiness quiz. Go to MarniBattista.com/quiz. I will link that up in the show notes, and see which of the 3 phases of ripple making you find yourself in. And are you ready to fully optimize that so that you are making big waves, you're making a big impact, your work is reaching the audiences you want it to, and your message is dialed in so you feel confident, clear, and you're ready to make the ripple. Again, MarniBattista.com/quiz. And now let's get into today's episode. Welcome back, amplifiers. I am so excited for today's conversation. We're going to talk about how to screw the should life. And our guest today is the one and only Marni Battista. Now, Marni helps women in midlife figure out how to reinvent the next chapter of their lives without sacrificing what they've already built. As an entrepreneur, author, transformational coach, podcast host, wife, and mother, she knows firsthand the pressure of trying to have it all. With her trademarked straight talk and humor, she helps women say screw the should life to overcome burnout and overwhelm and start living a life beyond their wildest dreams. Now, Marni has got a new book out. I'm very excited about it. I've been hearing about it for a while. It's called Your Radical Living Challenge: 7 Questions for a Meaningful Life, where she shares her own story and her struggle to live a life of purpose and fulfillment, and what she learned along the way, and what you're going to learn from her journey so you can make your life more fulfilling. So, Marni, I'm so excited to have you here. We've known each other forever, and we had a chance to do some work together last year. And it's just, oh my God, I love what you're doing.
No, thank you. I mean, working with you was such a huge pivotal part of bringing my purpose and my mission together to support the book. And so it's really fun to have all of that together and now be able to share it with an audience.
Yay. Well, you are bringing something to the world. And, I love working with ripple makers, and I feel like this is a ripple that needed to be made,
Yes.
And I think we got to start with what you mean by a should life, because when I first heard you talk about it, I had chills on my whole body. As a matter of fact, I got them again. What is the should life?
Well, I like to think about the should life as the set of rules of your world that you don't even know are there. And I always use the example of either if someone watches Bridgerton, or if you ever like Marvel movies or any great fiction book that you read, if you jump into it and it's well done, there are rules in the world and you just stop questioning it and you go, yes, this person has a superpower. And yes, this person, and you just believe it. And so what happens is in our own lives, we are living in rules that have been established from our culture, from society, from our parents, from our ancestors, from the country that we live in. Everything is creating this set of conditions on which we believe we have to adhere. And when we look at those and start to question every single assumption we make about what is true, then we can really see that we're kind of living in a glass house and that we
Mm.
want to kind of break it down.
Yeah, and when I hear you talk about the should life, I love that you're creating this framework. It's like these are rules, but I keep hearing these are rules that are trapping you or rules that are maybe limiting you. Is that true, or did I make that
Oh,
part up
well,
in my
yeah,
head?
no, no, for sure. I mean, it's so it's so deeply embedded in my consciousness that yes, a lot, and they're from everything from I should bring a bottle of wine when I go to dinner at Melanie's house to I should be married by 30 to I should do this for my boss because my boss husband is out of work. I should do this because, well, I don't have kids and they do, and so I should take on this extra work. Like there's just so many shoulds, and most of them are not. I should go out and have fun and make time for play in my life. Those usually aren't the shoulds that we're thinking about.
Mm. What happens when somebody is living from this should life rule book? What is the experience they're having right now?
They feel overwhelmed, they feel burned out, they feel guilty. That's a big one. Guilty that they feel guilty, right? Like, so they feel bad that they feel bad. They feel resentful. They can feel apathetic. They can feel like, why bother? They can have a lot of regret and remorse. And most of the time, they're really good at rationalizing, coping, and intellectualizing and telling themselves a story why they should wait for one day to start living the life that they really want to live.
Mm, that line right there. One day I will live. One day I will do the thing that I really want to do, right? It's like, when does one day actually become reality?
Well, it doesn't. And that's the thing. So I think that, especially for women that are listening, that we are living and we always have lived in such an achievement-based culture so that we achieve something and then there's like 10 seconds where we go, yay. But then you're like, oh, well, I could lose more weight. I could do a 10K instead of a 5K. I could, make $1.5 million in my business instead of 1 million, right? So the goalpost is always moving. And so then we never have this feeling of satisfaction in our lives. And I've seen so many people put off so many things because they think that, well, maybe when I get to that next milestone, then I'll be ready to actually enjoy my life.
Mm. Yeah. We talked a lot over the last few months about professional women who get stuck in a should life. And I'm wondering if you personally relate to that woman who's gotten stuck in her should life, because I know the book is a lot about your journey. But, let's create awareness of what happens for a woman who's driven, she's ambitious, she's pursuing this, should life, career, all the things. And one day she realizes she feels stuck, overwhelmed, burned out. Like, how do we get trapped there? And what do we do if we are finding that we're there?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I have a client, Alexandria, and when she came to me, she's very successful. She has like 17 letters behind her name, PhD, MPH. I don't even know what all of them mean. Single mom by choice. So we're not like giving our kids to someone else. We have our free time on the weekends. They were in middle school. One was just getting ready to start high school. Elderly parents, lots of siblings, adult child of an alcoholic, over functioning at work, missing out on her kids' school achievements, awards, plays. getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do laundry, staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning to sew the costumes for the school play. Uh, she was doing it all. And she kept putting off her health. She kept putting off having a relationship. She was so angry and wanted more than anything to quit her job, but she couldn't because she's a responsible grown ass woman. And so when we started to work together, one of the first things that she became clear on is that she forgot that she matters because her whole life, everybody else except her mattered. And it was so, so simple. The very first few weeks, we just literally like post-it note, put it on your phone before every single decision you make. What would you do if you believed I matter? And slowly over time, with a lot of other work, she started to believe she mattered. Stopped yelling at her kids, healed that relationship. Instead of quitting her job, she actually got a new boss and then she got a promotion where she made more money doing more of what she loved. She created friends, started going to a book club. She lost like 40 pounds, started dating. Um, and she stopped being the sole caretaker of her parents. She got her siblings involved in that. So it was a total life makeover. Um, and it started with that one small belief that was the big lever she pulled that really supported her in making so many different changes in her life.
It's so interesting how there is so much transformation at our fingertips when we become aware of a belief that's keeping us stuck and adopt a belief that can actually free us. I feel like that's what you're saying is sometimes it's the littlest shift in thinking that can bring the greatest transformation.
Absolutely. Think about your GPS, right? If you go like 1% off the GPS, right? It literally reroutes you, like, rerouting, and then you're like lost and going in another circle and having to turn around, right? Because you're not in the right direction, right? So it's really important that you set your mindset, your heart set, your skill set in this direction toward what you want your life to feel like, and then start calibrating everything towards that. And the
Mm.
cool thing is, when you're doing life design on your own terms, everything is an experiment. Every new thing you try, you get feedback. It's iterative. You learn and you grow. You become a creator in your life rather than a victim of your life.
Mm. That is something is so important. You just said two things that I think are the key that unlock so much greatness in our lives. And one you said is it's about having agency over your life, right?
Right.
And then two is this willingness to test, to explore, to experiment, to go on this adventure called what does it feel like if it looks like this? Is that part of your remedy or your formula of how you help people transform out of the should life?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about the Radical Living Challenge process really is this the blueprint that's based on the design thinking model at Stanford University, which all consultants worldwide use this model when they do product development. And when I was an empty nester, I got into a near paralyzing ski accident. COVID was happening. My business, I'd reached all these goals and I was completely unfulfilled and grinding, spending most of my time doing work I didn't love anymore. And I was like, well, what do I do to fix it, to change it? Like, I don't know what I want. And how do I even figure that out? Someone turned me on to this design thinking model, and I did my DJ mix master thing and created a spiritual element to it. And why it's beautiful is if you think of it this way, the product you want to design is your ideal life. You are the user of the product. So you have to go through these steps to understand the user now, who you are today, not who you were. And then all products go through prototyping. We don't just build the iPhone 16 without testing it, right? And so prototyping is just that. You do little experiments in your life. You scale a big idea down and you try it to see if you like it, because humans can't really very well predict what will make them happy. So when you get into an experiment mindset, there are no failures. And one of the principles I teach in the book about what makes a fulfilling life is to create. And when we're in autopilot, we stop creating. So the very act of experimenting is like a twofer, because you're actually creating, and creating creates energy and excitement.
Hmm. That's so compelling. I mean, I love the idea of just like using a model, but then having the creative energy infused into it. It's almost like you can blend the science of predictability with the art of exploration. I don't know if that's the way you see it,
Yeah, no,
but
I love that. And I was talking to someone earlier today, and we were talking about that thing that you've always loved, that thing that you always love to talk about. Um, and we were talking about how if you just figure out like what your soul map is, what really lights you up, and you start to see this central thread through your whole life, the ideation that can occur about all the different ways you could iterate and actually do that thing for work is endless. And that starts to create a lot of fun and excitement and adventure. And you get to create the sense of security and stability because you're creating emotional safety while you're also testing. So you don't quit your job, you don't like sell everything and run off to Bali unless that's actually an experiment that you want to do.
mm. Okay, so there's two questions that want to come out at the same time. But based on what you just said about like it's not going to blow up your life, I want to lean into that a little bit
Yes.
because this was a big thing. I know as you're bringing this work to the world, is so many people get stopped with, I want this life, but I don't want to blow up the life I have right now. Although sometimes the universe blows it up for you, right?
It does.
Yes, been there. Um, but let's say that's not feeling safe to somebody, obviously. We don't necessarily want to throw everything out. How does someone stop living in the should and allow the dream to come forward without feeling like they're about ready to throw everything they've worked so hard for into the wind?
Well, I think this is a super interesting question because when I think of my clients that have gone through this process, they come to me literally hating what they do. My favorite moment is when I get on a call with them and they show me their Google Calendar or their Outlook calendar, and there are no spots to eat lunch or take a shower. So one of the first things we want to do before we even start thinking about, what do you want is cleaning up what you have, because in the releasing and the dismantling of the shoulds, there's a lot of things that you might be doing today in your life that if you start focusing on what is essential and questioning those assumptions, you can simplify the life you have uh, pretty quickly. And honestly, every time we do that, like major things happen, like bosses change, more budget comes in, better team, better communication, better leadership. And that just sort of usually creates this like, huh, right? That frenetic, angsty feeling like I got to get out of here starts to go away. Your executive function of your brain comes back. Your nervous system calms down. You have less cortisol and adrenaline. Now, you are more able to create and dream and plan and patiently think about what you want to do because your life isn't a mess. So, we turn your life from a hot mess into like something hot and exciting.
Mm, yes, it's a hot mess to hotness.
Yeah, exactly, right. But like that you're really like um inspired and it's so crazy when we do that. There's an exercise I walk people through in the book about how to actually measure and track what blows your hair back and what are the things that you're doing that don't give you energy. And when I do this exercise with people, especially people who've done personal development work before, they always want to change their mindset about the crappy things. They want to have a better attitude about the things they don't like to do. And
Mm.
I'm always like, great, awesome. But also, why are you trying to convince yourself you got to do this thing? How can we recreate this thing? How can we delegate this thing? I saw an episode of The Crown once, and the queen had this really great system for deciding about if she has to do something. And now I teach it to my clients. It's like, do I need to be the one to do it? Does it need to be done at all? And is there someone else who can do it for you? And I was like, if the Queen of England can make decisions like that, you can too. And so it's amazing when you start to do these things, like everything sort of shifts and the weight on your shoulders just kind of goes, because now you start to redesign and redo how you're doing the daily things and it starts to light you up. And that's what we want.
Are those some of the questions that are in your new book?
Absolutely, right? Like, absolutely, you want to do that exercise on creating what I call your soul map. And you do that by tracking what gives you energy and what you're engaged in and where you're flow and where you're not. And then you start to look at those things, look at the patterns. Um, One example that came up for me when I first did this was cooking. Like, I love cooking. I was like, love cooking, love cooking. It was getting fives. And then I noticed over a 2 week period, I had these cooking things that were like ones and twos. I'm still cooking the same stuff, but I realized that like how I was doing it and my core motivation was really different. So if you leave me in the kitchen and y'all are out watching the football game and having a great old time, and I'm in the kitchen being your cook queen, I do not love it. But I love to entertain and have everyone in the room and everyone's engaging. And I realized, wait, so I want to create those moments for myself rather than doing what my mom used to do, which was a should I learned. Make the party nice for everyone, make it very elaborate, and sometimes you have to just stay in the kitchen so everyone else can have fun.
Hmm. I relate to that. I
Right?
think I have the same energy with it. You know, as you're talking about that, it's an exciting exercise. When I went through my coach training in 2001, that was one of the things that really shifted my reality about where I was going to, how I was going to build my business and how I was going to build my career. Was I started to look at what gave me energy and what would take energy. And it's the littlest awarenesses that can have profound impact on what you say yes to. And
Yes.
like how many times we find ourselves trapped in things that we didn't really mean to say yes to, but there was a part of it that was interesting. And now we're like, oh my gosh, this thing is like intertwined itself into my life and it's not giving me energy. So
Yeah.
I highly recommend you do this exercise that Marnie is mapping out for you. It can be the key to massive awareness that leads you to better decisions that helps you live that dream life that she's, wanting to inspire for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think really asking like what is essential. For me, this past week, with everything that we're recording this in a really high velocity time, and I was like, my capacity was much reduced. And so I just started canceling things and saying no to things because I started to feel this energy in my body of like frenetic. It was felt very old and very uncomfortable. And I was like, wait a minute, what is essential for me this week? And there's always the little voices, the should voices, and then being like, wait, what do I need? How do I feel? And it's really empowering when you can start living life really on your own terms. And you know what? Most people are pretty cool about it. The story you make up about what other people think, it's not your job to correct what other people think of you.
Mm. That is a writer downer, my friends, as you're listening in. And it's true. Like, I think we often make up a story in our mind that's the worst possible story versus the one that's possible. I had to cancel, we're recording this just as we're coming out of these horrible ravaged fires in LA. And I had to cancel so much because I didn't have power and I was completely discombobulated. We also had to evacuate. And there was just so much going on and I had to lead with grace. Like what would grace look like for me and what would grace look like for the people that I'm impacting right now because I'm not able to show up the way I need to. And I think that's what you're creating as a possibility is like when you're living the should life, I don't think there's a lot of grace in that usually for ourselves or others.
It's the should life also is very heavy and dark, right? Because when you're in the shoulds, it's funny. I was talking to my husband this morning. He was wanting to go skiing, and we were talking about, do you have time to go skiing? Da, da, da. And he was saying to me, like, well, I feel bad if I go skiing and you don't get to go skiing. I shouldn't have fun if you're not having fun. And I was like, that's a me problem. Like if you have time, like for sure, go skiing, right? But he made up that story, right? Like that it wasn't fair or whatever. So I just really want everyone who's listening to really think about everything that you think and be like, is this real or am I making it up? Is this an assumption that is a fact or is this something that I was told?
Hmm. Yeah. Yes. So good, Marnie. All right. We mentioned your book. I'm very excited for you with this book. Can we share with people how to get the book and what they're going to get from the book, first of all?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Radical Living Challenge, it's 7 questions for leading a meaningful life. And what it really does is, and I'll tell you this really quick story, is that when my dad was dying in 2019, literally dying, he was mumbling about his credit cards. And I had this thing of like, oh God, is this what it's like at the end? Like, you're still worrying about your money and success and what everyone is going to think. And it led me on this quest to find a new paradigm of what is success. If it's not money, if it's not skinny, if it's not young, what is it? And I discovered these 7 spiritual questions that come from the ancient Talmud, and I've universalized them. And I was on a run in Hawaii a few weeks ago, and I met this amazing Hawaiian who was talking to me about the Ten Commandments. We were talking about spirituality. And he said, the first 4 of the Ten Commandments are about your relationship with God, the other 6 about your relationship with other people. And it hit me, and I was like, the 7 questions are about your relationship with yourself. Ding, ding, ding. Right. And so that means that they are completely within your power to start having a new paradigm. So at the end of your life, if you look at these 7 questions, you will be able to say, yes, I led a truly meaningful life. And as you do learn these questions in the book, you're actually walking through the life design process. And I share my story of going through the process as well.
Mm. Radicallivingchallenge.com, right? Did I get that URL
Absolutely.
correct?
Yep.
Good. And I know you've put together a quiz. So if you're, like I want to do all the things that Marni can give to me, what is your quiz about and where do they find that?
So that's decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And actually, there's 5 different archetypes of people who will or will not live life on their own terms. So when you take this quiz, you will understand your archetype, what you need to do to shift, and how you can start to actually move into creator mode and start inventing and designing a life that you really love, one baby step at a time.
I love that. I had a little sneak peek into that when it was being created, and it's so good. So we'll link that up for you as well, just in case that was too fast for you to write down. Marni, I'm so excited for everything you're doing in the world, and
Thank
I
you.
just like to, wrap our conversations up with a couple of like get to know Marni, get to know the person that's bringing this work to the world. And I'm just curious. I consider you a ripple maker. I consider you somebody who's out there making big waves of impact in the world. What would you say is the boldest decision that you made that's allowing you to live and embody this work?
Yeah, well, so after 26 years of living in my house in Los Angeles, where I raised my kids, where I thought I was going to stay forever, I sold my house, put some things in storage, and lived in an RV and traveled the country with my husband for a year to figure out what really truly does blow my hair back. And that was a pretty big commitment.
And what came out of that for you?
Well, interesting. I've been trying to sell a book to a traditional publisher for about 20 years. And when I decided to do this and share my story, I got a yes. So that happened. But it allowed me to pivot my business, actually shrink it. Because what I didn't want was something big. I wanted something simple. I found a beautiful place to live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, where every day feels like a vacation. I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I have great friends and community. And I really love my life. And I could have never dreamt this if I would have gone on Google or just sat there and looked at a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's hard to access new thinking when you're holding so tightly to the thing that you feel stuck in.
And I was.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. All right, last question. As you're looking back on this journey over the last few decades of you doing big work in the world, what is something you waited way too long to say yes to?
Well, it's interesting. So I'm just going to do the last 5 years. So when I had this really scary ski accident and I broke 7 bones in my sacrum, and I had a belief that I would never ski again, and that I wasn't capable, and that I was fragile, and that I wasn't athletic, and that I would never be the same. Um, and I just celebrated my 1 year back alpine skiing. I hiked like 20 miles a week over the summer. Like I'm more capable than I think I knew I was even before the accident. So if I had to break so I could rebuild and know this for myself, then it was the journey that needed to happen.
Well, that feels like a very powerful place to end our conversation today, with the awareness that sometimes it's okay to allow something to break to make room for something greater to come through. I know it can be scary.
So
I know
scary.
it can be terrifying, and sometimes we don't have to break the whole thing.
Right.
Right? So you go get Marni's book and learn how to move through this in a more adventurous spirit, and to really like allow this dream life to emerge for you. It's like life's too short to stay stuck in the should life.
Absolutely. If it's not a hell yes, or don't do the maybes.
Yeah. Thank you, Marni. Thanks for bringing this
Thanks.
work to the world. Thanks for
Thanks for
being here.
having me. Thanks for helping me birth it.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.